But there is something, I think, going on here, as you said, with these smaller mobile games, and even the differences in pricing, right? And I think maybe with the next gen, we're going to see that where Sony's talked about streaming games and demos and things like that, and I think hopefully we're going to move away from you only have $60 games and you have arcade games, and hopefully there's going to be a bunch of pricing tiers in between there. And even Jack Tretton said PS4 games will start at 99 cents. He was saying,
right,
from 99 cents to $60.
So
if there's that spectrum of stuff, then I think publishers can do free to play.
I think you're ready to see
like
it. There are going to be new publishers though that come on and get this and really understand this and really reap the rewards of understanding this new emerging market. And the guys who don't.
But is it a spectrum or is it 2 points? Is it 99 cents or 60?
It's a spectrum.
I don't know.
It is absolutely
especially with free to play. I mean, it could be from 0 to
Right.
60, or it could be from 0 to $300, depending on kind of how much you're spending inside of these games. And you look at Clash of Clans and all these games.
You look at
spending.
something like Minecraft, which kind of sits in the middle there. That's hopefully more publishers are going to be inspired by the success of that title than them trying to replicate Call of Duty and Gears of War and those games for the 10 billionth time. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there's going to be a spectrum there, but I think it's going to be skewed much lower than it is going to be higher, because so many of those higher priced games, those big budget AAA games, they just seem so safe, and they continue to be so safe, and just not as interesting.
Though, right? This whole conversation started because you were saying, look, they're not delivering the numbers they used to.
I mean, safe in terms of design and scope, not necessarily financial risk.
I think that speaks more, and you could probably talk to this better than I can, but I think that speaks more to just how expensive it is to make these big games now. And if a game like Tomb Raider can sell 3 million and be disappointing, that's an expensive friggin' game.
Right.
It is. But see, here's all this stuff lives together. And you talk about used games earlier in the show, and you talk about sort of we've talked in the past about rentals and things like that. And everybody always says, oh, the publishers are greedy, the publishers are greedy. What it is the games cost so much because the gamers, whether they're the vocal minority or not, who's to say, I don't know, but there's a vocal group of gamers out there that are like, we need great graphics, we need great graphics, we need great production.
They feel entitled to all this great content.
And they are, but they have to pay for it. And so the idea of are there 2 points or is it a spectrum? I think ultimately a smart publisher is going to start to realize that you can from the ground up say we're going to make a 3-hour single player awesome game. Look, you go to Ken Levine and say, I'll tell you what, Ken Levine, here's $4 million. Okay, here's Unity. Okay, do whatever the you want, dude.
Right.
You can't go over because I don't got any more money. But you go make your Platoon.
Yeah.
Right? Or go to Genova Chan and say, it's got to be a shooter, Genova.
Right.
It's $5 million. That's what I got. But go to. I'm not joking. Yeah. Is that ultimately you're not going to get.
And then sell that for what? $19.99.
$9.99. Why $9.99? You sell it for the price of a movie ticket, right? Yeah. Ultimately, you're going to get interesting stuff, and you're going to see that it is a spectrum. It's not just 2 points. The only reason it's 2 points
movie
right now.
Movie tickets aren't $10 anymore either.
Well, no, but it should. Impulse buy. I think $9.99. I mean, ultimately, if you spent $4 million, I think even $3 million. If you look at something like a lot of the stuff.
Well, you look at like Journey, right? That was a game they said cost $4 million. I mean, I think it did well, but I mean, did that make huge money for Sony?
Well, I think ultimately that has less to do with the proving ground of this issue with Journey and more to do with, a lot of, whether you're talking Xbox Live or you're talking PSN, you haven't seen the kind of marketing for those services that you see with retail games. I think I hope to see these hardware manufacturers begin to put PSN, begin to put XBL at the forefront, so it doesn't become this thing that only a small group of people who have these consoles go to.
Well, I would assume, and I don't know this, but I would assume kind of the idea of like Xbox Live Arcade and these PlayStation games, like everything's going to be digital, right? So it's going to be like iTunes, like your storefront, and it's like there's no discrimination. Well, silly like Xbox Live Arcade, I think that somehow suggests that it's like a small little arcade Twitch game, and there are a lot of really advanced games that come out on Xbox Live Arcade, which are just cheaper digital games. Like when that Alan Wake game came out last year, it was like that was a full game. It wasn't an arcade game.
Part of the problem too is we've gotten used to PS2 numbers to define what success is, and the budgets have scaled accordingly as we've moved into PS3 and Xbox 360 era. But the problem is a lot of those gamers have migrated. Most of those guys, or a lot of those guys and girls, were casual and they went to iPads or they went to their computers, and so now we're kind of left with consoles that are really back like PS1 era, a little bit before the SNES and Genesis era, where it's like this is where gamers go. And so if we scale our budgets accordingly and say, look, you got to have a Last of Us every now and then, you got to have a Gears of War every now and then, but ultimately we don't need to sell more than 1 million copies, in order to break even, because we've budgeted accordingly, and that hasn't happened. And I think a publisher that comes along and gets that, I think, is going to do really, really well. But unfortunately, everything's got to be $50 million and up, and
Or
it's just
more. I mean,
absurd.
that's the next gen. I feel like, if they do another God of War, I'm sure it'll be like, oh, let's spend, $80 million on this, or $100 million. And it's like, it just keeps, scaling up, and then the expectations get ratcheted up, where Tomb Raider, I think, there clearly was expectations that it was going to sell, 10 million units or something in a month, which is just not going to happen.
Well, I think the current price of a lot of these current generation systems is also having a pretty big impact, because you talked about PS2 era when Grand Theft Auto San Andreas came out for that system. And I don't know the exact price of the console versus the software, but it's like, I remember it being much cheaper. Like, we still have hundreds of dollars. Consoles that cost $200 to $300 as opposed to $100 to $199.
Yeah, $199 used to be that sweet spot where you were finally going to
$49 was the price.
Last week we talked about always on for the new Xbox, this idea, and one of the things we didn't mention is this concept that perhaps if you think about a console as a service from now on, that it's always on, that you can have like we have in America with phones, you could have a subsidized box, so that you're paying an Xbox Live subscription over time and getting a box for $99 or whatever it is, so that you have a situation like Apple can have a big $299 number that they can point to when the phone doesn't cost actually $299.
That's a great point, because that could be part of the trade-off, right? With something like Xbox, where it's like, hey, it always has to be connected, but you're going to get the box for free or something.
Yeah,
that's great. Pay for Xbox Live every month or something, right? So
it's
like
great
that kind of trade-off.
Suddenly that becomes a great deal. That sounds pretty good to me.
I mean, we've seen Microsoft do that with the 360 this generation, and it seemed like it paid real dividends for them, because they tested it and then expanded that program to a bunch of retailers. So. Yeah, there's been a lot of rumors about that, and I wouldn't be surprised if that happens again in a much broader.
Well, we'll find out in a few weeks up in Redmond, but when we come back next week on the bonus round, we're going to look forward to some of the most anticipated games of 2013.
See all of our shows and game reviews now on the brand new GT app on Xbox Live, and the GT Originals iOS app too.